Next, on the main stage of the WVD TechFest 2021, we have Ryan Mangan presenting you Getting Started with MSIX App Attach, now at 3 o'clock. Enjoy the session and welcome Ryan to the WVD TechFest.
Thanks, Patrick, and thank you very much for having me here. So today we're going to talk about MSIX App Attach and how you can deliver applications dynamically to Windows Virtual Desktop. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so today what we're going to cover really is just a kind of an outline of an introduction. We're going to then talk about application delivery throughout the ages. So we're going to go high level back 20, 30 years. We're then going to talk about MSIX, what it is, MSIX App Attach. We're then going to look into a high level architecture of MSIX App Attach, MSIX image types. We're going to look at creating your first MSIX image and then obviously deploying that into Windows Virtual Desktop as that is currently in preview. We're then going to look at performance, some kind of testing I've done, and then also some troubleshooting hints and tips to help you along the way, because there's a few gotchas which you may get stuck with, and hopefully I can help you resolve them quickly. And then obviously some community tools and some of the MSIX App Attach vendors and people out there doing some really interesting things with the technology. So I'm not going to go through my bio, but just to kind of cover specifically on the WVD side of things. So I produced the Quick Start Guide for Microsoft on Windows Virtual Desktop. I helped design the AZ140 exam for Windows Virtual Desktop. That doesn't mean I know all the exam questions. I keep getting asked that. That's not true. I helped design it, not write the questions. And then finally, I also produced an introduction to MSIX, which you can App Attach, which you can obviously find on Amazon. So that's a little bit about me just on Windows Virtual Desktop. If you want to find out more, check out my blog, Ryan Mangan's IT blog. And then we'll get straight into the presentation. So first of all, what can slow down a WVD project? So throughout the years, we've found that infrastructure buying servers, connecting storage, connecting networking, all of that had a time associated to it. So with the kind of launch of cloud services and the adoption of public cloud in general, a lot of these kind of barriers, as we used to call them, or limitations or time bars, have been removed. So as you saw previously with Freakshow, with Bicep earlier on, you can essentially deploy your WVD deployments now via Bicep or ARM templates, which kind of takes a lot of the bulk. Then also Jim was mentioning about automation, and so is Esther. The world is changing from that perspective. But what can slow down a WVD project? And quite simply, applications. Applications have always been a pain. When you move from older operating systems to modern or newer operating systems, there is sometimes changes, and I'll talk about some of them changes and some of them problematic challenges which we associate with, and how hopefully MSIX and MSIX App Attach will change that for the good. So some of the pain points we see with WVD or virtual desktop infrastructure management is image maintenance, image corruption. You may have had the same image and you've been updating it and patching it for year and year and year, and all of a sudden it won't do Windows updates anymore. Whatever you do, you can't do anything with that image. It's done. It's completely broken. So time complete for application patching, all of these kind of challenges, application layering, repackaging, speaking to people saying it's taking 8 days a month to relayer applications for the deployments, and they have to do it every single month. And sometimes when the layering goes wrong, they have to spend weekends trying to redo it or completely recompile an operating system layer and then the application layers. So these challenges are pain, and how do we overcome them is the question. So when we look at application through the years, we're going back some time now to 1985 when Windows 1.0 was released, and interestingly, as it kind of changed, the graphical interface got better, applications slightly getting better, 16-bit applications were more of the norm, and then obviously when we jump again, 98 was kind of the popular operating system for a lot of people, especially for gamers and things like that. And then when they brought out Windows Vista, everybody's world fell apart. They changed various different things, like they got rid of these settings, the documents and settings folder, and changed it with users and the program data folder, which essentially changed the way applications behaved on that operating system. And then, just to add more spice into the fire, you then had Windows 8, which brought out the MSIX, and everybody was very frustrated with the challenges associated with modifying MSIX files and removing and cleaning up and customizing them on the operating system. And then when we look at the kind of the jump then, so in 2015, Windows 10 was released. So Windows 10 has been around, the initial version, from 2015 onwards, and now we're in 2021, so that's 6 years. You know, and this seems to be a lot more stable in the sense of structure, but we still have this common challenge, and that common challenge is moving applications from older operating systems onto modern operating systems. With obviously Windows 7 being end of life and people still using 16-bit applications, and I call it gated installers, preventing you to install on newer operating systems. These create barriers for you as IT admins to install and deliver applications to the end user. So then we look at the overall timeline from DOS all the way up to current day, and as you can see, there's a massive plethora of different operating systems and changes which have gone on for the last 35-40 years from an operating system perspective, and all of this includes significant changes to applications. So there is some things to consider with applications. So the common application migration challenges is 16-bit does not run natively on 64-bit. There's no capability there. It has to be emulated in some way, shape or form. Some older applications rely on specific system DLLs, which prevents the application from running on a modern or a newer operating system, because then DLLs do not exist. Drivers as well. Drivers may not be compatible, may not install on the newer operating system. All of these challenges impact the way you can migrate and deliver applications to the newer operating system, like Windows, which is desktop. And then another interesting one was, again, Windows Vista it's like Voldemort, if you want to say it. It introduced obviously UAC, and that again altered the way applications requested permissions and drivers to install software. And then the dreaded dongle, if anybody can remember them, where you'd have to plug this stupid card in the back on a parallel printer port or a serial port so you can open up an application, and that could be like some construction planning software or railway planning software, which you had to use a dongle. And all of these, some of these applications are still out in the wild today. I think an application we were looking at the other day was a hybrid between 16 and 32-bit, which was roughly 20 years old. So application delivery. So when we're going back some time here, a lot of nostalgia is probably popping off in the background. 1994, a system management server, which is now also known as System Center Configuration Manager, was the first version of delivering, inventorying applications and delivering applications through the operating system. It's not the first, but it's just obviously an example. And then Norton Ghost, released in 1997, one version of it, where it supported the cloning of individual partitions so that you could actually build that image and then clone it. So, just as a marker, from 1997, we've been imaging and putting all our applications onto a single image, essentially. AppV, formerly known as Softricity, SoftGrid, Tim Mangan, no relation, is a Jedi in that area. Obviously, he started, I believe, he works with Softricity, I believe, and obviously he's now known as the godfather of AppV. And obviously that was a way of delivering applications. Interestingly, AppV has its own challenges and doesn't offer a full compatibility for all applications. I believe there's a 60% circa compatibility with application packaging. And then you've got app layering, various different types. One of the favorites, which I was very familiar with, was Unidesk, and that was obviously acquired by Citrix later on. And then today you've got VMware App Volumes, and then you've got Citrix App Layering, which is the Unidesk. Things like cloud paging, and then the Type 2 hypervisor. What I'll say about Type 2 hypervisors is they're not compatible with Windows 10 multi-session, The challenge you have with them is twofold. Number one is the resource consumption. You're essentially running another operating system on an operating system. So when you're sharing resource on WVD, that's not a good idea to incur additional pain. So personal desktops, and as Jim hinted earlier, personal desktops are expensive, simple as. So that's a cost. And then only specific virtual machines allow you to do nested virtualization. So again, cost association and cost management for that as well. So wherever possible, we need to try and avoid using these emulation or heavy emulation technologies like Type 2 hypervisors is the kind of cookie. So that brings us nicely on to what is MSIX. So MSIX is the future of AppV, which they've stopped developing AppV. It's not deprecated, but there's a roadmap from 2026. You need to check out the support information on Microsoft's website. But essentially, Microsoft are working hard to continually improve MSIX. And MSIX is effectively a container with an application running inside. It has a similarity to an AppV package in the terms of structure, and you can open one up with a zip. So it's essentially zip. If you change the extension to .zip and open that with 7-zip or something like that, you'll see all of the components inside, which I'll show you later on. And it does support x86 and 64-bit applications. You can do 16-bit, and there's some magic around that, but that's for another day. One big point is if you're using self-assigned certificates, ensure you sign them and you install the certificate on the machine session host you're using, because one of the biggest problems people have is they've done all this magical stuff, create these app attach MSIX images, and guess what? They forgot to put the certificate on the machine and it doesn't work. So let's have a look at an MSIX package. So I'm kind of shrunk down some of the components just to make it nice and easy for people to digest. So first of all, we've got the application files, which is the application or package payload, essentially. We then got the manifest, which is basically the configuration file. So any customizations you want to add kind of specific ports, so you can kind of apply security from a port perspective, like a firewall type of port-based security mechanism. That is all done by the manifest. You then got the package block map file, which contains all of the app files and essentially allows the system to read it for when it does the block level transfer. And then when you sign the MSIX package, that's a good indication whether you've signed it or not, is there's an app signature file in there as well. Unzipping an MSIX, in there you can see various different things: assets, app data, metadata, the virtual file system, and then various files again. And as you can see, the app manifest, or package manifest as I call it, is in there. What can you package with an MSIX? Well, you can do files, registry, fonts, tiles, services, file associations, and URL protocols. Essentially, that's quite a few things you can do. And obviously, referring back to Tim Mangan, Tim and I yet to compare paperwork in the sense of testing, but I believe he's testing large enterprise applications and I've just been testing assorted applications from micro, medium, and some relatively large but modern. And I believe Tim's going back in time to some of the really complicated applications. So the success rates are different on either side. So I'm seeing 1 in 5 compatibility success rate at the moment on the applications I've been testing. And Tim is saying that around about 30–40% without PSF fix-up, which I'll come to in a minute, and up to 60% with PSF fix-up, roughly. So depending on the applications, and we'll come on to PSF fix-ups in a minute. And point to note, everybody, Microsoft are working on this, and near a home near you soon, that could all change in the next 6–12 months. So hopefully improvements will be imminent. Okay, so package support framework open source is essentially a set of files which you put into the MSIX package, which there's something called a PSF launcher, which reads a config file, which is a config.json, which essentially instructs the package to do certain things. So the PSF launcher does a lot of tasks, which allows the application to work in a nutshell. Some applications require this to run. However, point to note from my testing, it does add an impact on performance from launching the application, naturally, because it's what we call a shim. You know, it runs in front of the application. So kind of key features, some people get this slightly wrong, so I just wanted to reiterate this. So the install of 99.9%. So they don't mean that package success. They mean that you know, when you uninstall the application, it's more likely to remove than it would do as a traditional, because it's in a container, right? It's not actually physically attached to that operating system and entwined in the registry, etc., which is great because it reduces WinRot, so provides you a cleaner operating system. What we also have is, you know, the 64-bit block from the block map file, which I mentioned previously. That allows you to transfer at much better speeds and also helps with network bandwidth optimization. And then a bit of a deduplication play on there. There's a bit of disk space optimization because it won't use the same files twice. It basically shares the files across the apps. They're independent of each other, but obviously it's doing a bit of dedupe there. So before we get on to the next bit, I've got a nice little video for you showing us creating an MSIX using Microsoft's packaging tool. So I'm going to just launch MSIX packaging tool. You can download from the store or you can download it offline. I'm just going to click application package, create a package. And then I'm going to basically turn off Windows Search, disable that when it finishes doing its driver check. Disable. And then we're going to go ahead now and proceed with selecting the installer, which is on the desktop, and that's Notepad++, nice and simple because it's small. We're not going to be here all day. Make sure you set the sign-in preference of the certificate and the password, and then fill out the details for the package. Then launches the installer, and we go through and install the application. Similar to previous other capturing technologies from an installer base, you basically run the installer and it captures all the files you install. When you're finished, then you progress. As you can see, that is the entry point. We're happy with that because it's a small application, there's nothing else there we need. And then that'll go ahead and prepare the package. Then click next, and then the last option is where do you want to save the package, and you click create, and then it outputs the MSIX. As I've obviously populated the signed stuff, that's already signed, and I've already installed the certificate on there. So I'm just going to install it because I'm cheating really. I don't want to use a separate machine. And then I'm going to run that MSIX, put that in the bin first, and then run the MSIX and install that. As you can see, the publisher's me. It's not installed. We're just going to double check that first. Yep, not there. And there you have it. We have that working, installed, running, recreate a first package. Nice and simple. Okay. So moving on. So did you know you don't have to create an MSIX package? If they are on the Microsoft Store and you have an account for a business account, you can download them as offline and basically package them into an MSIX App Attach format, which we're going to talk about shortly. So what is MSIX App Attach? So you're thinking, why does he have a lorry on a screen when we're talking about IT? So MSIX App Attach is essentially MSIX expanded onto a virtual disk or a SIM image. The lorry represents it is a vehicle for delivering applications, attaching and detaching onto a Windows Virtual Desktop session host. It is not a solution, it is a delivery mechanism, is the best way to describe it. We're using native operating system APIs and we're delivering the disk and basically mounting it. And it is not the same as FSLogix. Concept, yes. Technology, no. So looking at traditional application delivery, we've got 3 images and we've got the common applications, and then each image for each department, finance, sales and technical, have different applications installed. So what is MSIX App Attach? So MSIX App Attach essentially leverages the capabilities, as I've already said, of the operating system, separating data the OS and the apps. It is leveraging OS APIs. It is not using agents. It's fast. That's the thing here. And it's only going to get faster as they improve it. Low repackaging overhead. You know, we're essentially just dropping in an MSIX package and then dropping it back onto the desktop. The impact to the user is seamless. Low impact to user sign-in as well, because what we do is when the WVD machine boots up, it pre-stages the package. What that means is it mounts the disks ready, and when the users who are assigned that group, it essentially allocates them and puts the application on their start menu when they log on. Nice and seamless. Moving on. So this is what an MSIX App Attach image looks like. You have the blue, which represents the image. Then you have the package, which is the MSIX package itself. And then you have the application within inside that. That kind of represents what you'd expect from an MSIX image. Some of the kind of terminology, expanding MSIX is essentially unzipping it and applying ACLs to that. Staging is where you basically make the application available to the machine, which is basically attaching the disk or the SIM image to that operating system so that it's accessible and doing the URL provisioning. Registering basically makes the application available for use to the user. Delayed registration is basically when it will provision after the session is established. And then on demand is basically, as it says on the tin, on the fly. So when we look at the MSIX App Attach model, first thing is we have a gold image with common applications on it. We then have the user profiles by FS Logics attaching. And then we have each departmental specific to the groups, the people attaching to the users. That is MSIX App Attach in a nutshell. So, confusion everybody, MSIX App Attach, notwithstanding Windows Virtual Desktop, is general release. The APIs, the components, the packaging framework is general release. MSIX App Attach for WVD is in preview. Windows Virtual Desktop is in preview, and hopefully sometime soon that will be general release. But if you were to deliver this onto physical devices on Windows 10 2004 onwards, then yes, you can use MSIX App Attach today, and there is technologies out there which can do that, and we'll cover them later on. Windows Server 2019 is not supported, and hopefully they will sort that out in the future, but it is a long-term services branch. So what does MSIX App Attach do? Key points. This is a bit where we just basically kind of confirm a few things. So number one, it does not improve application compatibility. It is the vehicle delivering applications in a certain way to the desktop of WVD. It does not improve performance of the application itself. It might reduce the overhead and the resource of the operating system which is attaching to, which we'll cover, but it doesn't actually improve the performance of the application. That is storage, RAM and CPU. Can you use it outside of Windows Virtual Desktop on physical and virtual? So on-premise VDI, multi-cloud, physical devices, laptops, yes, you can. It's not just for WVD. It's just Microsoft has started at WVD. Okay, so high-level architecture. So what we've got is storage. Typically, Azure files are it is NetApp Azure Azure NetApp files. That basically then stores the MSIX images, which then contains a number of permissions, NTF permissions, allowing the host to read that file share and see them packages. The packages are then delivered to the host, and that's from the first step is stage, where they are staged onto the system so the system can see them application packages, and they're either mounted via a virtual disk, VHD, VHDX, or via SIMFS, the composite file system, which we'll talk about. And then obviously, when the user clicks on their client to log on, goes through the process, then depending on the groups they're in, the applications for the RD agent are assigned to that user. And nice and simple, really. This is just another way of explaining it. So as you can see, you click on your icon to log into the desktop, you hit the host pool, you get your desktop, you get your user profile first, and then you get your apps. One of the things I didn't mention was the difference between common and group or departmental applications. Common applications are like what everybody has. You could even say like a driver could be common. So drivers don't always work in or don't work in an MSIX package. That doesn't mean to say they won't work, just install them on the image. And I'm sure my Microsoft counterparts will say the same. Don't worry about drivers, just install them on the master image, like a common application, like Office at this stage. Obviously, MSIX App Attach is designed for the group applications, for finance, stagey things, that sort of stuff. So when we move on to MSIX App Attach formats, we've got 3 different types. We've got 2 virtual disk, and then 1 composite file system. So VHD, VHDX, and SIMFS, the composite file system, also known as a SIM composite image. Looking at the composite image, you've got a number of files that come with it. You have a number of object files, a number of region files, and then the .sim file itself. The .sim file is what you would specify when you add that to Windows Virtual Desktop, and then that will then group all them files together and do its magic. You will notice that in that screenshot, the region files hold the data, and the object files are quite low in size, which would indicate metadata. So the data is in region, object holds metadata and volume system kind of information. Looking at composite file system, the big question, does it improve performance? Well, it reduces load and impact on the host. So if you're in an enterprise environment and you've got 10,000, 20,000, or maybe 1,000, I don't know, using SIMFS will reduce that consumption of memory on the operating system, allowing you to probably get more users on each individual session host. So bear that in mind when you're looking at designing your MSIX App Attach solution for your organization. So create your first MSIX image. So over to this section here, we've got a PowerShell script. So if you go to my GitHub, so that's GitHub/RMIT blog, all of this stuff is there, and I'll cover it again later on. So if you want to just download all of the GitHub, everything you need from SIM management, PowerShell scripts for creating is all there for you. Nice and simple, just to keep it simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a disk, which I've just done, and then I'm going to basically expand that into the disk I've just created. And then I'm going to go and have a look at that disk. Ignore that. And you'll see that there's a folder called MSIX, and within there, that is the package I've expanded. So I've just created an MSIX image in a matter of seconds. The reason why it's so quick is because I've done it more times than I've had hot dinners. Once you finish, make sure you eject. And then going on to the next type of creating an image, we're then going to use the MSIX MGR tool, which you can Google, and essentially it's a script which allows you to create a package. So I've just run that, and that spits out, does all the work and spits out VHDX. The problem with that is you can only do one package per image, whereas you may want to have multiple applications on one image. So if you've got loads of small apps, you may want to do I don't know, 10 applications because they're really small and they're relevant to that particular department. So bear in mind that the tools are good, but they don't allow you to facilitate everything. Some of the stuff you may need to adapt PowerShell and kind of manually operate some of the functions. Or alternatively, you can use a third-party tool like this one even, where we basically can create a virtual disk and then basically expand one or many MSIXs into the virtual disk ready for use. And then you've got a choice of one or many. You just select either a folder or an individual MSIX, and then it'll expand them all with all the correct ACL permissions required for it to work. And then you eject the disk and off you go. You can even do it with CLI. So we'll check it's there. When it prompts that error, that message, that's good. That means the ACL has been applied to system permissions. That's always a good sign that you've done something right. Anyway, that was just a real quick sample showing you how to create your first MSIX image. And there you are for going on to here. There you are, you can see the MSIX MGR. If you go into Google, type in MSIX MGR, you'll be able to download that and play with it yourselves. However, there is some limitations. Point to note that SIMFS only works on the latest operating system, not 2004. Like I said, if you want to go to town on MSIX App Attach, I've created quite a lot of tooling in some community tools, which I'll cover later on, which gets you going from testing and using MSIX App Attach, and I've even put some sim apps in there for you to play around with. So the AppCure MSIX image creation, like I said, one-to-many, multiple MSIX packages on a single image, GUI or CLI, so you can do thousands, you convert thousands while you're going to make a cup of tea. You can put this into DevOps pipelines. You can even use Bicep and some of this stuff. And then obviously you can test the applications on the fly, because the last thing you want to do is get to WVD, which I'm going to demo in a minute, and you then have a barrier where you can't proceed with actually attaching them applications or importing them into the host pool. So MSIX App Attach on WVD. So the required components, you need to ensure that you've enabled the validation pool. So pool validation for the preview. So you need to be in preview mode, and you need to be using the specific URL you've been given by Microsoft. And then you need to make sure you deploy the validation until it goes GA, that is. And you also need to make sure they're using the correct agent. If you're using any agent before, I'll expect you'll have issues. I also note there was an issue with this version of agent the other day where people weren't having any communication with the actual control plane. So be careful and be prepared to have challenges and issues associated, because it is preview. And then just to kind of run through some of the requirements here, is the challenge really isn't logging in and importing apps into the share. The challenge is actually making sure you've got the correct security permissions. So here's the trick. What you need to do is you need to basically create a security group in Active Directory and sync that to Azure, number one. What you do then is you then add the computer accounts of the session hosts into that group. You then go into Azure AD and you assign the NTFS permissions, contributor permissions specifically for that group. And then when you go into the properties and go into security and click edit, add that group again. And essentially what you're doing then is you're allowing the session host to read the Azure files share to actually read them MSIX images. And believe it or not, that specific issue, which I'm showing here on the screen, is the one that stops the majority of previews continuing. And I believe Microsoft also have a number of tickets open regularly with larger organizations testing this, which relate to this matter. So if you can crack this now, it's all about permissions. It always has been. And here's another trick. Make sure you run an AD sync and click reboot on your session hosts. The other thing as well is you'll notice under, if you click on the VHD or the VHDX or the SIM within the share and you click properties and then go to security, you have an object name. That is also what I call the absolute path. That is the full path you need when you import it into the WVD console. So you can PowerShell that object name out. So you've got the list of all of them in there, so you can just copy and paste them all in, or PowerShell it straight into WVD, or you can copy and paste them into Notepad and import them in, just to make it nice and easy for you. And as you can see, screen 1 and screen 2, so screen 1 shows a number of packages already added under the host pool, WVD test, and under MSIX packages. And you can see me there on the right hand side adding the package. Make sure you click active and on demand, otherwise it won't work. And then that brings us on to the demo again, which is the I believe the WVD. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add some packages. As you can see, just told you what I did, copy and paste them, absolute path, and that'll go ahead and ask me what to do. And then obviously fill out the details. As you can see, it gives you a nice little instruction of what the different two are. In this instance, I'm just using on demand and active, because obviously we're working just in a deactivated state. Obviously add the other two. We'll talk about disaster recovery as well, because as you can see, we're using an MSIX image path. There's certain things you need to remember when you're designing disaster recovery, because you can create yourself a whole lot of pain if you do it in a certain way, which we'll cover. Right, so I've added them packages, and then what I'm going to do is I'm then going to go and In fact, what I'm going to do is obviously you've got to publish them as well, but obviously due to time we'll cut that out. We're just so I've obviously added the packages. I've published the applications to the session host group, so the default desktop group. I've just added them MSIX packages to that group, and as you can see now, they're now showing. So if I go to disk management, you'll also see that we have a number of attached disks. So there you go. They're all attached, and then we have the applications running as well. You can see that we've put a critical application called Pinball on there. As you can see, we're just demonstrating that there's no installed applications under control panel. There's no magic smoke here. We have attached these using MSIX App Attach. And the other thing you can do is they behave very similar to your traditionally native mounted MSIXs. As you can see. So going on now onto the next bit, which is the MSIX App Attach business continuity and disaster recovery. So as Jim previously mentioned, things like cross-region replications in previews coming out, and there's GRS as well. So when you design an MSIX App Attach, if you take one of the options to build a separate host pool at another side, the challenge you potentially may have is that you're going to have to go for, if you've got a lot of applications that use the MSIX App Attach, you're going to have to basically re-add all of them on a separate share into that host pool. There's a lot of effort unless you can PowerShell it. So what's recommended is that you use either Azure files with GRS, and when it comes officially GA, the Azure NetApps cross-region replication, you can use Robocopy or AZ through a runbook in Azure, but obviously it's going to create more work. So when you're designing your WVD environments and things, make sure you take care and consideration into what the kind of impact could be for applications. And then we're moving on to some performance testing I've conducted. So I did two types of performance testing. So the first set I did registering and staging, so staging and registering the application, so attaching to the operating system, and I even did the native as well to kind of get a comparison. I also took an MSIX package with a PSF and then converted that into App Attach as well to understand the kind of impact from a staging and registering perspective, and then also into an app launching perspective. What is the actual impact? I wanted to see something here because nothing's really there yet. So if it's not there, go create it yourself. So looking at the results here, we see that natively the MSIX PSF and natively MSIX itself takes longer because it's actually installing onto the operating system in its container. But obviously MSIX App Attach is attaching itself to the operating system, which is much faster. And as you can see from the results here, SIM seems to be on top each time. Point to note, everybody, performance, configuration does matter, and obviously results will vary depending on the speed of the device you test on. So then we look at large. So Tim Mangan produced a post the other day regarding performance, and rightly so. I have been testing smaller applications. So from what he said, I thought it's important that I do look at something slightly larger, not the largest, and I probably do need to share papers with Tim at some point. But looking at the larger application, you can see that SIMFS on average does come out on top again. You can see VHDX is performing better and VHD is a little bit slower. I'll be honest with you, sometimes these can be the opposite way around depending on what's running on the operating system. So if the operating system is under duress, the behavior will be different. So what would it look like with 30, 40 people on it and then conducting these tests? And that's some of the thing which will turn to partners like Login VSI in the future to understand. And then we look at performance testing from an app launch. So what I did was I basically measured the call of the MSIX from the start time in the process and measured the difference. And as you can see from a PSF, because it's a shim, there is a massive significance in the sense of the launch time. I don't know what that is on larger because we're yet to do the larger testing on performance from an app launch. But as you can see, it does effectively double the time it takes to launch the application. SimFS, composite file system, does show better speeds than the others tested. So some troubleshooting hints and tips here before we get onto the community stuff. So certificates, when using self-assigned, I'll say it again, make sure you install them on the session host. That could be via group policy or manually. It doesn't really matter how you do it, just make sure they're on there. Otherwise, your MSIX packages will not work, or app attach packages. Make sure you've signed the MSIX package. If the MSIX package is not signed, you will not be able to use it. If you cannot add MSIXs to the WVD portal, it's most likely permissions. So check them, like we mentioned, make sure you create the group, make sure it's sunk across, make sure that the session host can actually read the share, make sure there's not a problem with the share like I had yesterday. If the same MSIX image is mounted, it will error. So if you've already got these images mounted and you're using a test machine, make sure you clear down that image first before you try and test it out using the WVD solution. Otherwise, it won't work because the disk is already mounted. So moving on to some community tools. So obviously I've got a GitHub with a lot of useful tools in there. You've got MSIX Hero, and I'll do a shout out to Guy Leach, who's created a PowerShell script for SimFS using the direct DLL. So check out Guy Leach's, I think it's Microsoft and the SimFS, but Guy's obviously been busy in the late evenings slaving away creating a PowerShell script for that, as expected. What I've done as well, I've produced a PowerShell module to help you handle SIMs. So get mount points lists all the different types of file system. And also I've created a mount and dismount tool, which allows you to mount and unmount SIMs on your operating system. There's also a command line version of this, and also the ability to put in the GUIDs to clear out some of the kind of stuck SIMs which may be left on your machine, because the challenge you've got is if you don't have an unmount tool, you're not going to be able to clear down the operating system once they're mounted. And then some of the interesting things as well is the SIM tool actually allows you to mount the image as a disk, so you can see the contents of it rather than messing around with a volume GUID. And you can also get the volume GUID by using get sims under the PowerShell module in my GitHub. As you can see there, you can see the different types of mount. I've got disk, which is drive letter, and I've also got volume mounted on there. So I've provided the option of doing both. And then just a quick one to show SimFS. So here I've got the sim mount tool running. And I'm just going to show you the aftermath of maybe after testing, which you're faced with. You can see I've got all these drive letters and if you do get sims, it outputs the ID as well, and you can go ahead and put them into the GUID to dismount and clean up. So I'll just do a few, and then we'll call time on that. So you can do this by a CLI as well, which is in the GitHub. So if you did want to just PowerShell all this and link it to the CLI, it's all there for you, ready to use. You get the picture. Anyway, so that's the tools in there for you to use at your own leisure. So you can create them with the MSIX MGR and you can play around with them to your heart's content. Bear in mind, SimFS is read only. So MSIX Vendors, we've spoke about delivering to MSIX App Attach WVD, but we haven't really spoke about some of the things out there to do it. So today you can use something called MSIX. MSIX is a delivery tool which allows you to deliver MSIX App Attach on-premise, on cloud, on laptops, desktops, WVD, I don't know, Parallels, RAS, you name it. You can use MSIX for that. At Volumes Force, if you're using Horizon Cloud with Windows Virtual Desktop, you can basically deliver all your applications for Volumes 4, which essentially is using MSIX App Attach, and I've done blog posts on that. If you want to read more, navigate over to my blog and have a read at some of that information in there. And also AppCure, as on Microsoft's site under third-party installers, that is one of the only products at the moment which offers the full output for MSIX App Attach, including creation, conversion, smoke testing, the full works really, and that's driven by CLI and via a simple GUI, just to make life a little bit easier for getting packages ready today. And the other thing which I didn't mention is you saw me do the MSIX packaging today using the MSIX tool. There's other tools out there. There's tools like Advanced Installer, which allows you to kind of create things through there, but also AppCure is the only tool I believe out there to capture a running application off a legacy operating system. So effectively we can extract that application and 9 out of 10 of the time put it into an MSIX, which speeds up the process of migrating applications onto Windows Virtual Desktop. If you want to find out more about the MSIX partners and WVD partner integrations, just go on to Google MSIX partners, third-party installers, and Windows Virtual Desktop partner integrations. I know the Windows Virtual Desktop partner integrations is superseded, and that's changing soon, but the web page is still there if you would like to have a perusal. So session summary, I've provided a getting started. I mean, we could be here for hours talking about this. We could go into massive deep dives into how it all works, some of the magic, some of the trickery, getting 16-bit applications into our App Attach. There's so much more we can talk about and share. But unfortunately, the excitement has to stop at some point because time is running out. So I'm just going to cover off a few more bits before the session finishes. But if you want to know more, feel free to please obviously message back to the community and feedback that you want more MSIX App Attach stuff. You want to find out more. This is something you want to be looking at in more detail. If you do want to know more, there is a book on Amazon called An Introduction to MSIX App Attach, and that provides a nice, real kind of long, in-depth kind of reading of getting started with MSIX App Attach, from support, how to set it all up, details of packaging, the processes associated with all of this. All of that is detailed in the book. And then some of the troubleshooting and error codes you may face either from outside of WVD and inside Windows Virtual Desktop. And if you want to read more about things like SimFS sprawl, how to manage that, some of the tooling, access some of the ebooks I've produced for Microsoft, and etc., you can access all of that through my my blog, which is ryanmangansitblog.com. And before we kind of move on to the final bits, I just wanted to say a big thank you to the sponsors of the event. Obviously, things like this don't happen without sponsors. It's very important. And also Simon and Patrick, a massive thank you for taking all of this time out of your personal lives to arrange to deliver such a successful event. And I'm grateful that you've allowed me a slot to talk about something I'm very passionate about. So details at the bottom. So GitHub, github.com, RMIT blog, and at Ryan Mangan on Twitter. So if you want to follow me and find out what I'm up to with my late evenings with development and things with MSIX App Attach, follow me there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much as well, Ryan, for your very valuable session about MSIX App Attach. That was awesome. Thank you.
No worries.
We have still a couple of minutes left and a few questions for you, Ryan.
Excellent.
So we can start with that before we can kick off the very last session of the TechFest in February. So Ryan, do you think there's a resistance to adopt MSIX format from major software vendors? That was one question raised.
So the interesting thing here is, it's a kind of a double-edged sword really, but let me put it this way. Some software vendors today have an MSIX already. So if I was to download an application like a graphics tool, like Affinity Designer, I can actually find that on the store. It's already there. It's, you know, you can download that as an MSIX pre-approved. Some software vendors, the effort to write in the universal packaging format might take longer. So Universal Windows platform might take a bit longer. Also, previously, some vendors have done, you know, like advertising in their installers. Obviously, I think that affects viruses and stuff now, so it's less likely to happen. So there's all these different kind of changes, but depending on the application. But I mean, my view is the ISV should be writing in the new format. You shouldn't be trying to put PSF package support framework fixes in a new bit of code. It should be resolved at the point of delivery from the vendor. I think PSF fix-ups, package support framework fix-ups, should be delivered for the older applications. You know, so I think there's a bit of a culture change. And yes, MSIX App Attach does have certain limitations, and some might class them as application fails, but some users might class that as usable. So it's not really for us always to class them as not usable. It's actually for UAT and customers, users to actually accept that, if that makes sense.
Perfect. Ryan, the second question I can see here for you is, can the MSIX tool package or the packaging tool package larger engineering apps like Autodesk Suite, Inventor, Autodesk?
Yeah, so I've done Solid Edge, and that was 11 gig. If that helps. It's quite a big one.
I think that's a good example here. The next question is, that's actually a one we had already. Has there been any issue with performance running CAD applications as an MSIX App Attach container or MSIX package?
No, I've not seen that myself. And I wouldn't understand why there would be. So you do need to make sure that you've got the right level of storage on the back end. That's a given. But applications mainly read. You know, there's less write than there is read on an application. So, you know, roughly application IOPS is from 1 to 50, depending on what it does. But from my experience, I've seen MSIX App Attach, if anything, or MSIX operate much smoother than a natively installed application. Right. And maybe that's partly to do with the deduplication it does as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And the last question from Jesper for you, Ryan. Will App Attach will be available to Windows Server 2019 as well?
I did mention that in the post, well, in the session, but I can't possibly comment on whether it will be included, but I have requested it. So whether it does or not is another matter. But because it's a long-term service branch, things do take longer to get into Server 2019. So whether it does or not, you know, we'll see. But that is something I have personally requested.
Perfect. Okay, Jesper's also asking you, do you see App Attach as a deployment method for FAT clients as well?
Yes. Yes, I do. I have actually been off outside of, during work, we've been asked to look at potentially 8,000 clients to use App Attach for delivering certain applications. And I think it's because the ability to update the application on the fly, so swap the image and deliver that application without the user realizing it, or add the new application, remove the old, synchronous, so that it doesn't impact them. Because the thing with MSIX and MSIX App Attach is you can actually deploy 30, 40 versions of the same application. You just need to label them differently, and they can run. So if you needed a specific version of Chrome, you could create an MSIX package for that specific version with a certain name and details, etc., and then package that as an MSIX App Attach. You could then deliver that. For example, if it was a specific application like Web Server 95, you could attach that, and the user will see Google Chrome, but it says Web Server 95. They open that and use it for that service only. So there is actually more play, more maneuver compared to traditional methods of deployment, because we can actually create different versions of that application for specific needs and requirements.
Perfect. We get more and more questions, Ryan, and we have still 7 minutes left. So I think
Let's
we should
go for it.
Let's
keep going. Here we go.
Perfect. Is there a limit or a maximum number of applications you can attach, or do you have some best practices to share?
So I've not reached a limit yet, but that's something to be confirmed. I can't possibly comment on the total limit at this stage. It's something I will have to find out and come back on that. I'll definitely post about that, but at the moment I've not got to that bit. But I mean, I've deployed over 150 applications to date without any issues, and that's out to over 1,000 test accounts. So yeah, it's something I need to kind of look into, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I can just confirm, because we have also environments where we use MSIX App Attach already quite often, and with a lot of applications as well. So it's working fine. It depends, of course, on the resources you provide to your session hosts.
Sure.
Without forgetting that.
Yes, yeah.
Perfect. And then I just have a feedback for you that it was a very great session, and I can just confirm here.
Excellent, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for everybody who attended. It was a pleasure, all mine.
Perfect. And I think that was the last question so far. Thank you very much, Ryan.
No problems.
So if you have any more questions, please feel free to raise them. Ryan will still be here, I guess, for a few minutes. And then we're heading to the last session of today in just 4 minutes.